Hey guys, and welcome to another very exciting filmmaking tutorial. Color correction and color grading are very important if you want your videos to come out looking professional. Unfortunately, chances are that your computer monitor is lying to you and making your video look more blue or more purple or darker or brighter than it actually is. How do you know if your video is actually properly color corrected and graded? Fortunately, Adobe Premiere Pro comes with some pretty advanced tools for analyzing the color information in your video, and in this tutorial I want to show you how you can use these tools to make your video look a whole lot better. A fundamental challenge for color correction and color grading is that if you are creating videos for YouTube like me, people will watch your content on many different devices, and each device has its own unique display that will represent colors in its own unique way. The very same video may look a little bit too blue for one person and a little bit too purple for another, and that is something you have absolutely no control over. However, you can use some of the advanced tools built into Adobe Premiere Pro, like the Vectorscope and the Waveform Monitors, to analyze the color information in your video and use that information to color correct and color grade your film project with much more accuracy. While this doesn't guarantee that it will look perfect for everyone, if you at least get the colors in your video correct from a technical standpoint, it will likely look much better for almost anyone who watches it. This is going to be an intermediate tutorial, and not only will I assume that you know how to use Premiere Pro, I will also assume that you have watched my basic tutorials on color correction and color grading. In this video, we will look at these concepts from a much more technical point of view. But now, since the video isn't going to correct and grade itself, let's jump right into the tutorial. Welcome to Adobe Premiere Pro and some fun times, not only looking at, but also understanding the color of your video. The very first clip we will have a look at is this coastal shot that I took on Phillip Island down here in Australia. It is a pretty nice shot already, but let's have a look at the actual color information in this video so we can make it look even better. Now, I am using Adobe Premiere Pro CC 2015, and over the years they've changed the tools and some of the effects that you can use to analyze and work with color. However, even if you're using an older version or a different piece of software, you should pretty much have the same tools and the same effects available to analyze and work with color. The very first tool we will have a look at is the Waveform Monitor. If you are using an older version of Premiere Pro, you will have to come up into the window menu and open up a reference monitor. A reference monitor is basically the same view as your main display, but it's a secondary view that you can position somewhere else. Let's pull it to the side. And in your reference monitor, you can actually right-click, go down to display mode, and well, I don't have the options available anymore because I'm on a newer version of Premiere Pro and they've moved the options. But down in here, you should have options for Waveform Monitor, RGB Parade, as well as a Vectorscope. When Premiere Pro CC, I believe 2013 came out, they implemented the Lumetri color engine into Premiere Pro. The Lumetri engine is actually what usually runs in SpeedGrade, and so they've changed all of the tools to work with color in Premiere Pro, and you can now find these tools under Window, and then you'll have Lumetri Color and the one we're going to use, Lumetri Scopes. Now, these scopes may look all technical and scary, but they're actually really easy to understand. And once you understand them, it is so much easier to manage the color in your image and really make your video pop. Now, the first tool I want to look at, because it usually is the first one I use, is the Waveform Monitor. So I'm going to temporarily disable my Vectorscope as well as my RGB Parade and just concentrate on the Waveform Monitor. The Waveform Monitor shows you the brightness in your image, and the left side of the monitor represents the left side of your image, and the right side of the monitor represents the right side of your image. So this is really left to right, the exact same as your video. The Waveform Monitor is a scale, and it goes from 0 up to 100, well, a little bit beyond, but we only care about 100. 100 representing absolute white, and 0 representing absolute black. And watch this Waveform Monitor as I scrub through my video. Can you see it's shifting a little bit, and it's obviously picking up, it's live updating with my preview window. And what I can see is there are a few spots here in the image that are absolute white, and if I look over here, that's actually these waves. These waves here are absolute white. If I were to color pick these values, it's absolute white. So it clips at 100, which is the maximum value. Over here, there's a little bit of brightness with some of the foam over the waves, which is these little blotches here. And then towards the left, it gets a little bit darker because we don't really have much brightness on the left side of the image. The other thing I can see as well is that this solid block here of bright pixels is actually my sky. So this is actually a fairly bright sky, but it's not maxed out. It's just fairly bright, so it spans across. And then all of this here is the land as well as the ocean. The Waveform Monitor is really great at showing you whether your image is properly exposed. Ideally, you would want the image to contain colors from the entire spectrum, from 0 all the way to 100, so you know you've got the full dynamic range to work with. I can see, however, that my image doesn't really go all the way up to black. There's a little bit of a gap here at the bottom, so my image is actually lacking a little bit of contrast, and we can easily add that back. Let me make this a little bit smaller and push it off to the side so we can see what we're doing. Now I am going to come into effects and I am going to search for a curves effect. There are other color correction effects that you can obviously use. The reason I like to use curves is, for one, I really like using curves, but also this is a really universal effect and you'll find it in any editing software that you may be using. So let's apply a curves effect to our Phillip Island clip. And let's come down into the curves. So these are the RGB curves and it has 4 curves. One is the master, which will affect all channels. So this is really the luma, the brightness. So I can change the entire brightness of the image. And I can separately manage the red, green and blue color channels in my image. Right now, I only care about the brightness because I just want to fix up the exposure of this image. And if you've never worked with curves before, the concept is actually pretty easy. Every curve essentially has 2 axes. The x-axis is the input value and the y-axis is the output value. So it maps an input color to an output color, or in the case of the master curve or the luma curve, it's an input brightness to an output brightness. In order to bring the darker pixels in my image a bit closer towards black to increase the contrast, what I have to do is I have to come into my curves, take the bottom left corner of the luma curve and push it over towards the right side. Keep an eye out on the Waveform Monitor and see how the bottom pixels are being pushed downwards. Obviously, if I go too far, obviously everything starts getting clipped and you get some total black errors in the image, which is not what I want. I just want to push it down a little bit so it's kind of touching black. Maybe a few black pixels is not a bad thing. And what has happened now, if you have a look on this image itself, let's push that down just a little. I've added a little bit of contrast. So if I turn my curves off, it's a little bit flat. If I turn them on, the contrast is improved. The other thing is, while I do have some waves that are already clipping, the rest of the image doesn't really max out very much. It doesn't go very bright, so it looks like a little bit of a grayish day. And I do want to push the upper color upwards a little bit more, just to again increase the contrast. So again, going to come into my curves effect. This time I'm going to take the top right corner of my curve and pull that over to the left side a little bit. And again, keep an eye on the luma curve. Can you see how the highlights, the top range of my pixels is being pushed upwards a little bit? So again, I'm just going to push this not all the way, because obviously I'm getting a little bit of clipping here, but I'm okay with that. That's just the tip of the waves. I'm just going to push it up a little bit towards the left side. And now, let's push it out of the way. If I turn my curves on and off, have a look at the image. So this is before, and this is after. So I've just added a lot of contrast into the image, and it just looks a little bit richer. To me, this is usually the very first thing I do, just to get the exposure of the image correct. Also, do note that if you find yourself having to make very, very large changes on the luma, if you have a really flat image and you push all the darks really dark and the brights really bright, you are only increasing the luminance. You're not increasing the saturation. And sometimes your final image may have a lot more contrast, but it may feel a little bit desaturated. So one thing I tend to do, I like to search for, you can use a hue and saturation effect or whatever. In Premiere Pro, I like to use the fast color corrector. So let's apply a fast color corrector to this clip as well. Come down and let's just push up the saturation, maybe to 110. I don't want to overdo it. I just want to add a little bit so that in my final image, all I've really done, I've added a little bit of contrast and I've added a little bit of extra color. To me, this is a much more appealing image. Also, just a note, right now we are just doing color corrections. We're just fixing the color. We're not color grading, which is then styling it and adding a mood into the image. Ideally, you would always want to color correct your footage first to get it to an ideal point, and then you add the color grading where you then play with the mood and you tint it and do all sorts of artistic effects. At least that's how it works best for me. Now that we've learned how to use the Waveform Monitor to fix the exposure of our image, let's start looking at color. Here I have a small clip of water doing a horrendous job at trying to take a stable photo of Fuji-san, and if you look at the color, it's a little bit magenta-ish, pink-ish. Something isn't quite right with this. Before we start fixing up the color, however, I'm going to quickly check my Waveform Monitor to make sure the image is properly exposed, and I would say that actually looks pretty good. So we've got some highlights here, which is the screen, and the shirt is pretty white as well on that side. And then there's some black here, and the seat, the pens, the keyboard, and this actually looks pretty good. Let's look at the tools that we have available to analyze and work with the color in our image. For that, I'm going to bring up the Vectorscope, as well as the RGB Parade, and I'm going to hide the Waveform Monitor. Let me make this a little bit bigger, and let's look at the RGB Parade first. The RGB Parade is actually very similar to the Waveform Monitor in that it shows you the image left to right, except it shows you the image 3 times, once for each channel. On the left side you have the red channel of the image, again left to right is left to right in the image, then the green channel left to right, and the blue left to right as it matches in the image. You can see right off the bat that the red channel, the red tones in this image are a little bit stronger than blue, and then followed by the green channel. So this kind of tells you that most of the colors seem to be sitting in that red magenta-ish area. And we can look into the Vectorscope to see how the colors in our entire image are distributed within the spectrum. The Vectorscope is essentially a color wheel, so it's got red, green, blue, yellow, cyan and magenta, and it shows you in like a little point cloud which color the pixels in your image are. And you can see that a lot of the pixels are kind of up here in this little quadrant, which is kind of red magenta-ish. So there's a big blob here. It's pushed a little bit in that directions. There's very little green and just a little bit of yellow in the image and a little blue. But you can see there's definitely a little bit of a red and magenta tint going on in this image. Now, before we go any further, let me quickly show you something cool, and maybe it'll trigger an aha moment with you, just like it did for me. Let me quickly apply a fast color corrector to my water clip. And the fast color corrector contains a color wheel, and this color wheel actually matches exactly onto the Vectorscope. So you've got red and magenta up here, then you've got blue and cyan, which match down here, and then you've got green and yellow, which again match yellow and green here. Now watch what happens when I actually pull the color on this color wheel towards the green. Can you see how I'm essentially shifting? I'm shifting all of the colors in my image down towards the green. So now my image is mainly yellow and green. And if we look at the image, it sure looks green to me. So we've shifted the color by pulling this color wheel, and this matches the Vectorscope. So I can shift my colors from red and cyan downwards a little bit more into the neutral area. Now, it's not quite that simple, and we'll get to that in a minute, but it's kind of cool to see how the color wheel affects the color in your image. Let's quickly reset this. And have you ever wondered why hue angle is called hue angle? What does an angle have to do with color? Have a look on the Vectorscope, and I'm going to go in and change the hue angle. And you can see that the color in my image is actually rotating around the center point. So the color wheel actually gives me a really easy way to modify the color in my image, and the Vectorscope shows me exactly where the colors fall within the spectrum. Another thing you will notice with the Vectorscope as well is that it has this little fenced off area here. And this area actually defines the broadcast safe colors. So your entire color information in the image should fall within this area. The moment you go outside of this zone, your image may no longer be safe for broadcast, and the colors may not be represented properly. To show you what I mean, and again to explain a little bit more about the Vectorscope, let's go into the fast color corrector. And what do you think is going to happen when I drop the saturation to 0? Well, let's try it out. And again, keep an eye on the Vectorscope. I've just desaturated my entire image, and on the Vectorscope, all of my colors fall within the center, which is no color at all. There is no red, there's no magenta, no blue, no cyan, no green, and no yellow in my image. It's just nothing. But as I increase the saturation, you can see the color coming back in. So all of my colors push outwards. And if I go a little bit too far, right here we're going way out of what is broadcast safe. And if you look at my image, the colors are way blown out. So this would probably not work very well if it was being broadcast on TV. Let's bring the saturation back to 100, and that is still within the safe range. So that's all good. And let's get on to actually fixing up the color in this image and getting rid of this weird red magenta tint that we can clearly identify from the RGB parade and the Vectorscope. And it is important to note that I didn't just look at the image, think, oh, it looks a bit red, and started fixing it. I looked at the image with the tools, with the Vectorscope and the RGB parade, to ensure that what I'm seeing is actually correct and it's not just my monitor lying to me. Let me push the scopes out of the way and let's quickly delete the fast color corrector for now. So we're back to where we started. Let's first fix up the white balance of the image. And remember that the RGB parade and the Vectorscope show me the colors in my image as it's seeing in the preview window. So I can actually restrict my video to an area that should be white, like Walter's shirt, like just this area here. And my Vectorscope should show me nothing, it should be pretty centered. And my RGB parade should be very level, they should all be pretty much the same because I shouldn't have any color tint in my image. To do that, again, let's push the scopes out of the way, and I'm going to come into opacity and I'm going to draw a mask. Now, Premiere Pro, I believe CC 2013 again introduced masks on the layers themselves, which you don't have in older versions, but in older versions you can actually come into your effects panel and search for the... it doesn't exist in this version anymore. In older versions of Premiere Pro you have a garbage matte that you can use instead, but it does essentially do the same thing. What I'm going to do, let's bring in the scopes again so you can see this happening. Let's go into the opacity of the layer, select the pen tool, or use a garbage matte if you don't have this feature. And let's draw a mask on Walter's shirt on an area that should be nothing but pure white. Bam! And both my Vectorscope and my RGB parade have been updated to only show me the content of my preview window, which is just this little snippet here that I've masked out. And you can clearly see that this is not pure white. The Vectorscope clearly shows a magenta-ish tint, because otherwise it would be centered to show you that there is no color information in this image. And my RGB parade isn't even, like I would expect my red, green and blue channel to be exactly level, because otherwise this isn't white, this is a tint of magenta. This is a mix of red and blue, which will give me magenta. Now there are again multiple ways to fix this, but I just really like the curves effect. What I'm going to do is I'm going to search for the curves effect and let's apply it to our layer. And let's come down here. What I want to do is essentially I want to level out my red, green and blue channel to be even so that this is white, and I want to see my Vectorscope return to the center. Whenever you're working with an RGB parade or a waveform monitor, it is important to understand what highlights, mids and shadows are, and just in case you're not aware of it, the highlights represent the bright parts in your image, so it's usually in the range from 100 to 70-ish. Then 70 to 30 is usually your mids, so your mid color brightnesses, and then your shadows are at the bottom. These are also known as gain, gamma and lift, in case you ever come across those terms. And if you go into a curve, and if you make changes at the top end of the curve, you are going to affect the highlights. In the middle, you're going to affect the mids, and at the bottom, you're going to affect the shadows. Now, I want my red, green and blue in my RGB parade to be on the same level, and they're all in the highlight areas, so the changes I have to make will be at the top end of these curves. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to push the red one down a little bit, and for that I'm going to come into my curves, take the top end of my red curve and just push that down a little bit to maybe about here. So I've pushed the red color down. Green, maybe let's bring that up just a tad, so pull it up a little bit. And the blue is still way too high, so again, let's come into the blue channel in our curves effect, and let's bring that down to about the same level as green. And can you see the Vectorscope, how all of the color has been drained from our image and it's all centered around the middle? This indicates that we are getting closer to white. Let me just tweak the blue a little bit, and maybe I'll bring the red down just a tad, so that in our Vectorscope, it really is almost pure white. And if you look at this image now, this is looking pretty white to me. Let's disable the curves effect. I can see a little bit of a purple tint on my monitor, and again, obviously, the Vectorscope shows that there is a magenta tint. If I turn on my RGB parades, the color is corrected now and it should be nice and white. Let's come back up and let's take away the mask. And now our image is properly white balanced. So again, this is the before. You can kind of see a really ugly magenta tint. And this is after. One last point I want to talk about before I let you go are skin tones. Sometimes you can perfectly white balance an image, but there's still a weird color tint on the skin tones and it just doesn't look natural. So whenever I have a shot that includes a person, I like to check that the skin tones are okay. And the way we are going to do that is exactly the same way we did the white balance. Let's again bring back our scopes. Let's zoom in a little bit on Walter's funny face. Let's grab the pen tool and let's mask out a piece of Walter's skin. I don't think I want to use this forehead. It's a little bit too sweaty and shiny because being a photographer for Walter is really hard work. Let's instead just use the side of his face, just a bit of his cheek. Bam! And again, our vector scope and our RGB parade are confined to just this little slice that we've masked out. And this actually looks pretty good. One interesting thing is that no matter what your skin color, whether you're African American, Asian, Caucasian or whatever, your underlying skin tone color, because of the blood that's running underneath your skin, is always the same. This makes color correcting skin tones really easy because you should always see the exact same pattern. In your RGB parade, you always want red to be up at the top, the highest, then green, and then blue towards the end. And even more importantly, on the vector scope, you want to see all of your saturation fall between this line between red and yellow. This line here is actually known as the skin tone line, and you want, when you're masking out a piece of your skin colors to fall along this line, otherwise your skin tones in your video are not accurately represented. I think I'm actually going to push a tiny bit more blue into this just to move this line over a little bit more towards the right. Actually, maybe let's use the fast color corrector again because it has that nice color wheel that is really easy to use. So let's apply a fast color corrector to our clip. Come back down in here, and I actually want to change the hue angle just a tiny bit to rotate this over a little. There you go, it's just 2 degrees over, so the skin tones fall right onto this line. And now let's come back up, move the scopes out of the way. Now let's get rid of the mask, zoom back out, and this is now a properly color corrected image. Let me bring the scopes back in and disable the effects. So this is the image we started with, so it's just a little bit red magenta tinted. We fixed all of that up and pushed it down a little bit, but then you can see the skin tones are just a little bit off. And then we fixed that up as well and just pushed a little bit more life into the skin tones. And this is the final image we ended up with. Color correction is a real art form, and I'm not a colorist, I just learned enough to get by. But it is absolutely amazing how much better you can make your video look by just understanding and applying these simple techniques. And that's all there is to it. Now, that wasn't all that hard now, was it? I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and as always, if you do have any comments, questions or suggestions, just leave them down in the section below. If you did enjoy this video, I would greatly appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up, favorite it and share it with the world. And if you do want to see more cool filmmaking and visual effects tutorials, don't forget to go to youtube.com/surfacedstudio and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I will see you later.